It's the Kink Consultant podcast, where we're turning up the heat on all things kink and dating, relationships, and pop culture. So close the door, plug in your headphones, and let's get down to it. Hey everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Kink Consultant. Today I am joined by Sir Marvelous, a pro dom and pleasure coach. This is the very first time I'm bringing a pro dom on, especially a male pro dom. So welcome, Sir Marvelous.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited, and I'm a huge fan. So excuse me if I fangirl a little bit.
You know what's funny? We are fans of each other because we were both on Dr. Tara's podcast, Love
Yes.
Bites. And
Yes.
I mentioned you, and she like paused, and she was like, "You know, he brought you up too. You're fans of each other." Like, I guess
Definitely.
we are. Yeah. So we followed each other, or at least knew about each other, and then we had the pleasure of meeting in person in August in New York City. I mean, since then, I think we've stayed in touch on and off. But you've got a lot of irons in the fire, don't you?
Sometimes I beat myself up because I have so many ideas that I don't follow through on, but I'm just happy to have them in general. So that's always good.
Yeah, the creativity is flowing, and that's the important part. But then, yeah, it's scheduling the time to actually do it. Let's start with the absolute basics here. Pro dom and pleasure coach. Are these not the same thing?
Oh, I love this question. Yes and no. So they do work hand in hand together. So as a pro dom, that's when I'm giving people tailored experiences as they explore BDSM for the very first time with a trusted professional. So that's how that works. And as a pleasure coach, I show, singles and couples how they can use BDSM as a way to increase pleasure in the bedroom. That's the short and sweet of how they may differ. But they, like I mentioned, they do work hand in hand together because they support one another.
Do you find you're teaching couples how to be dominant and submissive?
No, because sometimes I even stay away from those words. I actually just made a video earlier today talking about how I don't prefer to use the word dominant when I don't have to, because sometimes the word dominant may carry the negative reputation of being someone that just wants to be in charge, barking orders, super aggressive, and just trying to spank everybody. So I prefer to use the word leader or pleaser because I feel like that's something that we can easily identify with. I believe that dominance doesn't have to look a certain type of way, and I know you agree with me on that one. So sometimes I show people that, like, if you're the type of person to create a beautiful ambiance by lighting a few candles, changing the lighting, putting on a sexy playlist, and giving your lover a massage, best believe you're stepping into that dominant energy in a very sensual way. So again, I show people that it's about who's taking charge in that particular moment. And as you know, it could change. It doesn't have to be today I'm a dominant and tomorrow I'm submissive. It could be tonight I'm both dominant and a few minutes from now I'm going to be submissive, or walk into that energy, so to speak. So I try not to get locked into the words.
Yeah, no lies told. But on this point, now you've just got my little wheels going because I never don't use the word dominant. And I'm wondering, like, this is something that we may have to agree to disagree on. I don't believe in using different word because a negative connotation has been attached to something. I want to reclaim the word dominant as opposed to moving away from it. What are your thoughts on that?
I love that, but I come from a background of sales and marketing, and sometimes we have to just respect the world we live in as it relates to knowing that if we lead with certain information, I'm here to sell you insurance, it's not going to work. But if you lead with, some other way in, like, here, I'm here to talk about some of the benefits that come along with you being a part of a union member, that might hit a little bit different than I'm a salesman trying to sell you something. Same thing. It's the approach that I take with, BDSM. Even with social media, as much as we want to be able to lead with, I'm a BDSM educator and we're doing this for the betterment of the world, Instagram doesn't care. They're going to be like, shadow ban, nobody's going to see your content. Good luck with that.
Even you saying that gives me such anxiety, Marvelous, that I'm like, I need to open the app and make sure I still exist there.
Every time it takes a little bit too long for the app to open up, my anxiety goes so high. I'm like,
Same.
oh no.
And I try to make my business not like that, but it is what it is. It's the risk we're out here taking. I told you this in August, and it is still true. While I have been a dominatrix, I have never hired a pro dom. I want to know, if I were to come to you, can we do a practice sort of thing of what would you ask me if I wanted to hire you as a pro dom? What
Okay.
does that look like?
Well, first and foremost, it starts with the consultation, as I'm sure you could imagine, where I start all my consultations the same. I just use the BDSM quiz that most people are familiar with, bdsm.org, and I go over the results with the person, but I translate some of the wording to be more practical in the everyday world. So one of the things that tends to resonate with a lot of people is, for example, a lot of the women that end up inquiring about my work tend to have high submissive desires on their kink quiz. Again, sometimes the word submissive and dominant doesn't necessarily resonate with certain people until I explain that to want or to have submissive desires doesn't mean that you're submissive in other elements of their life. It's usually because you are someone that has a lot of responsibility on your plate in your regular day-to-day life, and that could be dealing with work, home, building a business, taking care of family, or the list goes on and on. So a lot of the times your ideal situation is to come home to someone that's going to kind of take the reins, where you don't have to be the boss, you don't have to be the dominatrix, you don't have to be the person leading or running the show. So the way that I would able to, again, to kind of go back to your question, that is the way that I break down the kink quiz versus the traditional definition of a submissive. It just needs a dominant and and it's like, I don't get how that lands for me, right? So we would start with the kink quiz. We would go over those things, and that would kind of like bridge the conversation for some of the things that are going on in your life and maybe why you would enjoy this particular experience. In that conversation, of course, we cover, interests and limits. I don't go too much into that in that conversation because I believe that part should be done in person. Another thing is that sometimes the way that people imagine things or experience things in the past is not the way that I like to do things. Impact play is not the same with every dom. Some people are heavy masochists and heavy sadistics, while I identify as a sensualist, but even every sensualist is not the same. So I love the idea of you being in the space with me and me showing you, hey, this is one of my floggers. This is the way I prefer to use it. Tell me now if that's something you're open to or not. You get what I'm saying?
Okay, yeah. So the consult, does that happen over the phone, and then in person we fine tune what happens?
Yes. So the consultation happens over the phone, and then conversations are going to happen over the weeks leading up to the actual experience, because it's really unrealistic. First of all, I don't allow anybody to like book me in like 48 hours, 24-hour notice. That's not how I run the show. Plus, my sessions are pretty pricey, so a lot of times people need to create space between when they create that initial deposit versus when they're actually going to make it to the dungeon. So on average, most people book out their sessions a month or 2 months out, and during that time, we're able to kind of build a rapport, having conversations and answering different things and building more of that trust factor until you actually get here. And then the negotiation is what really sells people to be like, man, I definitely chose the right person.
It's so much about being listened to and knowing that your desires and fantasies are going to be met.
Yes.
How do you balance that for people with your own boundaries?
I know this sounds cliche. A lot of people say like, oh, I derive pleasure from giving pleasure, but it's my truth, through and through. I really love giving people what they want. So as far as boundaries are concerned, the only thing that I really have off the list is like, there's no sex allowed in my actual session. But even then, when I'm talking to people, I let them know that even if you find me attractive, if you fantasize about me, let me know, because I can play on that in the dirty talk. I can play on that with the psychological play, the mental stimulation and things of that nature. So as far as boundaries are concerned, the only thing that's kind of like on that list is like, we're not going to actually have sex in this session. But majority of everything else, is kind of on there. I guess that's the best way that I could probably answer that.
For me, I love that you mentioned the mind play side of it, because when I was a pro, and even now, one of the hardest things is the mind fuck side of it, to get into somebody's head. And so many clients, I don't know if many women who come to you ask for this, a lot of men who came to me would ask for mind fuck. They really wanted that, their heads messed with. I don't know if it's as common with women, but it's something I know I enjoy having done. And I love that you mentioned, like, one of the things you do, it's like, well, tell me so I can make this better. Is there anything else you do like that to like really play with the mind?
It's funny you mentioned we've crossed paths in many ways, and we were recently on the Dom Sub Summit, right? And one of the classes I spoke about was erotic edge play. That is probably my go-to weapon for everything BDSM is that I do. I love the idea of a slow burn, building things up, teasing things out, and getting you to want to release so badly. But I'm like, nope. And it goes beyond just orgasm, right? It could be anything that you desire. I've played with people with like draining them, making them squirt, making them orgasm, and now they just want a sip of water. And of course, I'm doing it safely, so I want to make sure that people know that I'm not out here depriving people water when they need it most. But with certain clients, I'm able to be like, oh, you want this? And I'm just drinking it in front of them, and they're just so thirsty and so dehydrated of what was happening in that moment. So I love the idea of just playing denial games in general with whatever a person may wants. And then I love the power I feel when I finally give them that thing. So
The denial is everything for me.
yes.
Like, yeah, I know. I love to be denied only because I hate it. And
Yes.
therein lies the mind fuck of that. It sounds like you really provide amazing tailored sessions as a pro dom. How are you helping people as a pleasure coach? What's your approach?
So what I've learned is that we have approached relationships in an realistic way where we are willing to invest time, energy, and money and so many other aspects of what we think is going to make our lives better, but we don't or aren't usually willing to invest in the pleasure aspect. So what I mean by that is that we tend to be having the same type of sex, month one or year one in our relationship that we intend to have 10 years in our relationship and expect it to have the same effect. And that's really unrealistic. People don't live in the same houses. They don't drive the same cars. They barely stay at the same jobs for that long. So why should we be having the same type of sex? So I try to show people that we have to invest in different things, different experiences, learning different ways to turn each other on and engage with one another. And BDSM is like a buffet. However, like you mentioned, with society not truly understanding all the things, all the ins and outs of BDSM, it is one of the things that make it hard for people to want to embrace right away. So I show them, listen, BDSM can be used as foreplay for both men and women. This is a way, and foreplay is going to build that arousal within our body and eventually lead us to having stronger, more powerful orgasms. And then those experiences are going to bring us better together.
I completely agree with you. I've never thought about it, how much we change in our lives. Like, why would I consider having the same sex for 10 years? Except for me, and everybody who listens to the podcast knows this, I have a fetish, and my obsession with discipline and punishment and needing that has never changed.
That's it. And hold on, before I interrupt your wisdom, I want to be clear. The fundamentals, the bread and butter, the things that we enjoy should always be a part of what we enjoy. But it can't be the only things that we use. You can't do the same spanking every single night and expect you to have, a different result or a more powerful result. That's another thing that I had to teach, especially men, because our ego is directly connected to our performance in bed. So the idea of a man coming to a pleasure coach or any kind of coach when it talks about intimacy is that they think that means that they're a bad lover, or that whatever they know is not good enough. And I'm like, that's not it at all. But again, how often can you eat the same meal every day before you want something a little bit different? Even if it's the best thing, the most high quality meal, all the things that you could ever want in this meal are here. But after a while, you got to switch it up.
My answer is about 90 days. And I know this because I become obsessed with certain meals and for 3 months at a time. And then I'm like, I'm ready to move on. And you're so right. You want, because so much of what I enjoy, the part of it is the fear and the switch up. If it was the same every time, it just wouldn't be the same. It would be too much of the same. I would get over it. There'd be no fear injected into
even
it.
Even if you just scheduled a day of exploration, like, every couple of weeks, every couple of months, we're going to dedicate one day to try something different. I'm a nerd through and through. So I love the idea of learning things with my partner and then trying to explore those things. With me and my ex, we used to have this ongoing joke where we say like our whole relationship was an ongoing negotiation, because it's not a single moment that would go by where I wasn't sending an article of some sort or video of something or starting a conversation. And she knew that if I brought it up to her, then that meant that I was interested in giving it a try. And if we went in on that conversation, then it would possibly happen or show up in another way. So I love learning with people. Love it, love it, love it.
Yes. Oh, and I feel like it's so underrated, this idea that we're learning together, especially I think in the kink space. For me and my own clients, what I noticed is one person is trying to, it's sort of like pulling teeth. They're trying to get their partner into kink. So it's not even the learning together, it's just trying to convince. And that's when you really hit your stride. It's when you're both excited about learning together. That's it. That's the goal. I actually think it's more of the goal than the end, the goal of orgasm,
They say the journey is better than the destination in a lot of situations. We all think that we're going to get to this place in life where everything is going to be good, not realizing that entire experience, getting to that destination is what transforms you. You get to see people in a vulnerable state. I did read that, one of the best ways to bring people closer together is to do things that both people are new to. Where so often we want to introduce people to things that we're we do very well, so we can look like the authority, we can look like the man or the woman in that situation. But how about you both try something you've never done before and allow yourselves to be kids again, to make fun of each other in a healthy, safe, way, and then be vulnerable in that way. It's an amazing way to bring you guys closer together.
True, because both people have to be vulnerable at the same time, which can be scary because then there's no leader. Both people are learning and playing. Good points. When I started doing this, everyone was like, how can you be the kink consultant? Why? And I was like, I never said I knew everything about kink. I said I talk about it all the time. And I do that by reading new things. And there's always a new order on Amazon for a book
Oh my
coming.
goodness. More new toys or
Yeah.
new tools or the money we spend on the knowledge part of it all.
The hobby, the knowledge, I know. And I just feel really fortunate that in my pro dom days, I feel like I went through BDSM University. I had a lot of smart women who had experience back as far as the 80s. They were in
Yeah.
the scene in New York City. So I just heard so many stories, got so much knowledge from them. But it doesn't change that you still need to be searching for sometimes, I don't know, the more vetted knowledge,
Yeah.
the peer-reviewed industry level of knowledge, as opposed to this one time in this dungeon, we did this to someone and they really enjoyed it. Also
Yeah.
valid learning. Sometimes it's good to hear
You gotta
from different people.
diversify, definitely. So that's why one of the hardest questions for me to answer is like, where do I learn, or who have I learned from? Because I don't want to take away credit from anybody that I have observed, but I'm always learning. I'm always looking. I'm always looking for inspiration, because I really take the statement, "You got to keep the glass half full." I take that to heart, because it's not half full. It's not half full for me. It's half empty at all times. Because I want to be able to know. I want to give myself permission to know that there's always more to learn.
I know. It's a great pressure. I get referred to as an educator. And yes, we were both on the Dom Sub Summit, making us educators, but it's a heavy word. A couple of episodes ago, I spoke to Nick, the Forge Bear. I don't know if you follow him, but we were just talking about the title of educator. It's one you get by default, because if you are up here talking about it and people are learning from you, then you are by default an educator, and you have to take that responsibility seriously.
Right.
So that
No,
you have to be learning all the time. Like, I'm glad you're half empty on it, because that's the right approach.
Yeah, and then you have to, because also things evolve and understandings are going to change over time, and you just have to leave room for that. There's always so much to learn, and like I told you, like what I might be into today can change tomorrow. And we got to be very careful with the constructs that we build based on opinions that are no longer valid, especially as it relates to like sexual liberation. One of the things that I really pride myself on doing and supporting in my work is sexual liberation for women, because for so many years, centuries and centuries long, women have been told, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this, while men are able to run amok and do whatever they want and get credit and high fives for it while they're doing it.
There are just so many examples of how that plays out, and sex is just one of them. It's interesting though, I think things like book talk and like the erotic novel just really surging in the last 15 years. There were all those like Harlequin romance novels since the 80s, but I think it's become very mainstream and not embarrassing to read such things anymore, and I think that helps women claim some of their power as well. Of like, oh, I can be the hero of my own story and be submissive, or whatever word you want to put on that.
Absolutely, right. In fact, that's one of the tips that I give in my Foreplay 101 book, is to read erotic novels together, and if you want to take it a little bit further, try to read them in a way where you kind of embody in the characters that you're reading.
If someone wants to go find your Foreplay 101, where would they go?
SirMarvelous.com. I love saying that, because prior to having SirMarvelous.com as a domain, I had to say, follow me on this and underscore this and that, and it's just like so complicated to remember and how to find. But now I'm like, SirMarvelous.com. You'll find everything about me there.
I know, believe me, as a podcast host, I love when someone has that. Just like, yeah, just go to the website. You'll see it all there. SirMarvelous.com. As I said, you have a lot of irons in the fire. It's not just pro dom. It's not just pleasure coach, writer, educator. I saw recently on Instagram that you are partnered up. I don't even know how to put this, like a TV show. It's all Black creators creating content that
Black
seems
Touch?
sexy.
Yes, Black Touch.
Yeah.
So blacktouch.com, blktouch.com is one of my favorite places, my favorite entities. He's ran by a good friend of mine named Brian, and he focuses on showing erotic intimacy within people of color in a way that is just not fetishized like some of these other like channels or porn websites do. It's genuine pleasure, it's genuine connection. It's not, again, highly fetishized in any way, way, shape, or form. It's just a great, amazing space to be in or to indulge when it comes to wanting to learn about pleasure. Because even now, you know, for myself personally, when it comes to like masturbation, because I like porn. I don't know if that's going to be something hard for people to digest, but I do love porn. But I don't like mainstream porn as much as I used to back in the days. I don't like the idea of watching people that are just there for the sake of getting a check. I love seeing like the content creators that are couples that are kind of vlogging their journey of their pleasure and stuff like that. So I feel like it's a real connection, it's real intimacy. And that is what Black Touch kind of show, not kind of, that's what they focus on showing, like a real genuine connection between two people that are having a sexual moment. So definitely check that out.
And are you starring in some of these?
So yes, but I don't do, so Black Touch does have everything. They have, you know, solo masturbation scenes, they have BDSM scenes, they have full sex scenes, they have oral sex scenes, tease, denial, all the things that traditional porn websites have. But again, it's just shot in a more artistic way. Myself, I don't perform sex on camera, but I am there doing some very sexy things. I have 3 or 4 scenes on that website now where it gets really, really good. You get to see a lot of my work.
Awesome. All right. Well, put away the disappointment that we're not watching you have actual sex, but that's okay. We all have our own boundaries. Speaking of just, I guess, pleasure in general, do you have a favorite scene that you have done with a client? Like a scene where you were a pro and you remember that scene really well?
So many of them. This is always the hardest question to answer because I don't want to leave anybody out. I recently made one of my clients come with an air blower. Literally, like, it looks like a blow dryer, like it blows cool air. I have a hard time describing what it is. I recently made her squirt and orgasm from just blowing air on her clitoris. She was tied up the entire time. She was gagged. She was being choked. She was being talked through her orgasm. And just to watch, because I was able to record this clip. She gave me permission to post it, but obviously not her information. So I'm going to post that soon on my Twitter. I'll send it to you at the end of this so you can see what I mean as well.
Oh my God, please do.
I love it because you got to see her clit get erect in that moment from beginning to end. And you get to see the buildup of how the clit starts to, like, I always tell people that clits get hard, similar to how penises get hard. I love one educator that says, you know, come as we are. It talks about the fact that our parts are made up the same way, just in different ways, you know? So we get erections on the outside, women get erections on the inside, but also your clit does get erect on the outside as well. So to be able to see that and then watch the build up of her pussy starting to enjoy it and then starts releasing, it was so fucking amazing. Mind you, she was fully binded the entire time. Legs were tied to the table, arms were tied to the table, mouth was gagged, hand on her throat, and of course my words just tickling every part of her body.
You really are someone who enjoys giving pleasure because you did, like, you weren't experiencing anything except her pleasure and her enjoyment, and that sticks out for you as a top moment. I love that.
Yeah, for me, I really have my Michael Jackson or LeBron James moment in sessions. You know, I'm not a basketball player, I'm not a dancer or a singer. You can't tell me anything when I'm in that mode. You know, that's my thing. And I feel like, you know, especially as a boy, you know, growing up as a young boy or young man in general, not playing sports, I've always wanted the idea of knowing what it felt like to have a crowd cheering for you, winning the championship, or just performing to a high level. You know, that thing, that trophy moment. And I found it. Even though it happens in private, it does happen on stage, and sometimes I feel like a superhuman version of myself. Like, I'm a big anime fan, so like one of my biggest or favorite things was like Dragon Ball Z. So I feel like I'm turning Super Saiyan in that moment where I'm like unlocking these different levels of myself. I'm always impressing myself, so I love that.
Yeah, that was an amazing description. I'm like, oh shit, he's unlocked something that I think people spend their life searching for, is where do I feel that fulfillment? What
Yes.
gives me that sense of pride?
I'm sure you get it too. Don't you impress yourself at times? You like, after a scene, you like, wow, I dug deep for that one.
I do. You know what though? I still want the public applause. You know, it's like what my intrinsic motivation or motivation might be a little bit different, but I understand what you're saying. After a good scene or a session that I've thought of beginning to end and it blows
Yes.
someone's mind, absolutely.
So that means you're a huge exhibitionist, I'm assuming. You love the idea of that
More of a
recognition.
voyeur. You know what? I had an exhibitionist moment recently and I wasn't expecting it, and it was just me on display and no one was, it was both private and very public at the same time, and I did enjoy it. I would say I'm
Okay.
more of a voyeur though, because I get really excited by seeing the things that you're not supposed to see. Like the things that
So
are supposed to be quote unquote private.
So I love that you mentioned being a voyeur because, for example, I love your explanation of what being a voyeur looks like for you, but I hope that you would agree with my definition. So whenever I see somebody have, voyeur on their BDSM quiz results, I let them know that I assume that they're a nerd right off the top. And part of that reason is because though we know voyeurs are people who can derive pleasure from watching other people engage in pleasure, such as porn, live sex, or even, like you mentioned, erotic plays on stage and things like that, I feel like there's another side to voyeurs that doesn't get as acknowledged, which is basically that nerdy or that brainy side, because a big part of the reason we want to watch these things is because we want to learn. We're interested in learning about different things that we might be interested in trying ourselves one day, or just seeing how people navigate. So I feel like that is one of the things that kind of glue us all together in that voyeur umbrella, so to speak, is that idea that we do want to learn different things, and seeing how people do it and pull it off is something that really gets us going as well as the pleasure part.
100% accurate. I am so curious. I want to experience and see everything, and I just want to take it apart and understand it. Yeah, so I would say there is that nerdy aspect of it, especially when it comes to sex and BDSM. Okay, you found this moment, you found this source of pride. When do you think you knew or understood you were kinky? What was your journey to discovering this side of yourself?
I swear, I really should work on shortening this story, so I'm gonna try my very best now.
No, we have time. Give us the story.
Okay, so I was about 17 years old when I brought my first sex toy. 16, 17 years old, around that time. And the reason I brought that sex toy is because I had a partner at the time. I was coming fast whenever we would engage. I was just looking for a way to last longer in bed, so I ended up Googling, different tips and tricks, and I never found those tips and tricks. What I ended up coming across were women that were writing blogs about their experience with men sexually, and they were complaining about never having an orgasm with their boyfriend or their husband, and how they were so happy that they had vibrators because it was the only way that they would able to ensure that they would get an orgasm. So me being young at the time, I didn't know what a vibrator was or certain sex toys, but I kept seeing it come up and up. So I decided to go down to the Village in New York City, and which was a sex toy. I wasn't even old enough to get in. You had to be 18 to get in. So I had to stand outside with a crumbled up money and ask some random guy to walk in and buy me a sex toy. Actually, I said a vibrator.
What the fuck?
Yes. So when I ended up getting the toy, I didn't know what I was doing. Again, boys, we don't like reading instructions, right? When I got home, I just pulled it out the bag. I turned it on and saw how it worked. So I was like, all right, the next time that I'm with my partner, I'm going to use this thing. Again, me not knowing what I was doing actually worked in my favor, because when we were actually having sex, in the middle of having sex, I took the vibrator out and I put it on her clit while we were in missionary position. She went crazy. It was so good to her. She started orgasming. She started squirting. It was just like, I felt like a kid in a candy store where all the candy was now free. It was so good for my ego. It was so good. I didn't even think about coming in that moment because I was enjoying what was happening so much just from her reaction. And it was like that moment, neurons started firing in my head. I'm like, if one toy can do this, and I didn't even know what I was doing. It was literally a perfect accident, so to speak. If one toy can do this and get this reaction, what else is out there? And I think it was a blessing that I was so young because I was impressionable enough to think this way. You understand? Where I was like, man, I have to buy more. I have to figure out what's going on, and be more intentional. Because again, like I told you, I was standing outside a store, a complete stranger, asking a complete stranger to buy me a vibrator. There's no intention in that. But it worked out anyway. So I knew from that moment that I was going to find out more about toys, and this was something that I needed to share with other people. Me being a young guy, when my friends would come over playing video games, and they're in my bedroom going through my closet or looking around, and they're like, well, bro, what's this, man? I'm like, let me tell you, I'm opening up shop right then and there doing a class. And them being too young to truly embrace what I was trying to share, they never forgot what I was sharing with them. So they would eventually come back to me to ask me questions about sex and intimacy and things like that, because they knew I was the open-minded friend. It really changed everything. So it was more so that moment that really, really defined me and my desire to want to learn more about how to give pleasure.
I mean, and shout out to that legendary man who bought an underage
Thank you.
About a kid, a vibrator.
I never thought about it that way, because there is somebody out there that is the origin story to Sir Marvelous for me.
It's never developed in a vacuum the way our origin story, it always involves someone else, some impression. Usually, hopefully, it's a good thing, like this legendary man who bought you a vibrator. Yeah. You were impressionable. You weren't intimidated by it. You were like, let me buy more. You were at the age too where I feel like anything sexual was exciting. So it was like,
Oh yeah, I'm a
more please.
teenage boy. Come on, you can't. I think that's what helped me really get through to my coaching clients, the male clients, is understanding that like we are connected to our ego, and I know that ego historically has been like a bad word that men and their inflated egos, but when you learn to work with that idea that our ego does motivate us and give us inspiration, it's a way to get your message across. Because a lot of the times, men don't feel like they need to be better in sex or giving pleasure. The number one thing, and I know you hear this a lot, I don't get any complaints. I would be so
I
rich.
know. Yes. And I know. And I'm like, I'm not even sure we're ready to address this then yet. Cause you know what I mean? It's like, if this is their belief of themselves, then like, let's just leave that aside and work on what they're actually here for first. Are your classes online or in person?
My classes are in person. I am currently working on releasing more things for my Patreon and my loyal fans in the sense of it being official classes, but my coaching programs are done one-on-one, like what we're doing now via Zoom or different platforms, so it's more private. But I will be releasing actual classes. Like my first one, believe it or not, was the edging erotic class that I released on my 4Dom sub. I'm going to also use it for my platforms as well. I have an impact one-on-one class that I'm going to be releasing. I've taught classes literally all over the country, but I never thought to record them and put them on actual platforms so that people can replay. It's a simple concept, but believe it or not, I just didn't tap into it the way that I deserve to have. But now, moving forward,
Yeah.
2025 is going to be the new version of that.
And
Yeah.
everyone can go to sirmarvelous.com to
Yeah,
find all of these classes. Yeah.
got
Sign
it.
up for coaching. And I assume also if they're interested in a pro dom session, they can also find that through sirmarvelous.com.
Yes, they can. Absolutely.
So you've got those online classes, you're working with people one-on-one, you're pro doming. In general, in life, what role do you see BDSM playing in people's sex lives? Is it for everyone? Is it just for some people? What do you think the relationship is?
So I do believe that it can be for everyone. That is actually, I'm going to rephrase that. I'm going to start it. It is for everyone. When somebody says that they don't like BDSM, I look at them as somebody saying I don't like food. Because to say you don't like food is kind of crazy. There has to be something you like because there's so many different categories of types of food. And with BDSM, people have to understand that it's not one thing. It's an umbrella term that covers millions and millions, if not more things than you could ever count. So there's going to be something that you can find in an umbrella that's like for you, and then of course a bunch of things that are not for you. So, but the main role that is going to play is just going to help motivate us and give us more ideas of ways that, again, we can bring each other closer together. Because in order to do BDSM correctly, you have to communicate, and you would be surprised at how many people, grown people, out here having sex with one another, with people that they love, and they never have a conversation about what it is that they enjoy or what they don't enjoy. They're just kind of letting it happen and expecting everything to kind of fall into place.
Surprised and saddened, I would say, by the number of people who experience that. I know communication is key. It's everything. It's the foundation. And so many people are just skipping over that part right.
My favorite question to ask, and I ask every single client this question before the negotiation begins, after the small talk kind of ends. I ask them, so what is something that you would say that you've learned about yourself that you really enjoy during intimacy? And the majority of my clients are 30 plus and even older and have so much life experience. So many of them look to me and they go, I've never been asked that. So you've been having sex, you've had children, you've have grandchildren, you have graduated this, doctorate of this and this, that, and the third, all these different relationships, and not a single person that you've had sex with has sat down and said, what do you enjoy? And that's mind-blowing to me.
Heartbreaking.
That is mind-blowing. So that just is a way to reassure myself that I'm definitely in the right field, because, and you too, we're here to encourage people to have these conversations. We can talk about anything and everything else that, is deemed to be hard, whether it be bills, whether it be health, whether it be finance and things of that nature. But when it comes to pleasure, it's like people expect it to just be natural and just to fall into place. And to some degree it is, but you're doing yourself a disservice if you're not investing, time, energy, and even money to some degree in expanding and your knowledge of what pleasure can look like for you and your partner.
100%. I completely agree. And it's important. You really are doing yourself a disservice if you are not, creating a cycle of feedback and improvement, learning about what your partner's needs and wants are. And that it goes both ways. That's the cycle. Like it's not just one directional. You want to learn from each other.
If it wasn't necessary, it wouldn't be such a pleasure gap as it is. There are a lot of men that are not familiar with it. So many men that are not familiar with the pleasure gap as a whole. But then there are so many women that are. So there's definitely a disconnect happening right now. Because if you ask the average woman what the pleasure gap is, and she's going to say right away what that is. And then the man is like, what, like some foreign object that I just mentioned. And I'm like, no, this is a real life, realistic thing that women are going through.
Yeah, 100%. It's probably something I went through in my younger years, but then as I got older and more comfortable with my own wants and needs, I felt more comfortable advocating for what I wanted. Now, I've always been a communicator. I have always been the person who says, do this, touch here, more like this. Like, I'm just naturally communicative about what's going to feel good for me because I'm like, I'm here to have a good time and I want to make sure I'm responsible for myself having a good time. And I do that through that. However, I know there are a lot of people who are not open to feedback. My thing is, it's on both people to close the gap. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, for starters, if you do your absolute best to create a safe space to speak to your partner, and understanding that one of the key points to creating a safe space is being sure that the person is ready to have that conversation. Just because I wanted to have that conversation with me doesn't mean that you just getting off of work or dealing with the kids or getting off a Zoom call, you're not necessarily ready to have this conversation. So step one, make sure that part of you creating a safe space to have convos is choosing the right time to have it. If you truly can say in your heart of hearts that I've done everything that I can to create a safe space to have this conversation with this person that I love and care for, and they're not being receptive, the hard truth is you might need to consider a new partner. You might need to consider a separation. You might need to consider a transformation in your relationship because you should prioritize someone that is going to give you a safe space to talk about the things that you want and need. So that's the hard truth. The hardest thing to ever have to say to someone. I want to preference that by saying if you know that you have genuinely tried to create a safe space, not just bombarded a person with conversations, oh, I'm not coming, or this isn't good or that good. Like, no, honey, can we sit down? This is the great time for us to talk. I would love for us to talk about something that's not bad, but it's super important to me, and I want to make sure that like you have a safe space to express what you feel and I have a safe space to express what I feel and so forth and so on. If you can genuinely say that you have tried that a few times and they're just like completely shut off to it, maybe that's not the partner for you.
100%. I can't disagree with any of that. I think too late in life or too late in relationships, we realize we're not with someone who's as curious as we are, who's not as willing to be flexible in this area. If it's important enough to us, it's one of those things where you either sit with the disappointment and stay with the person and you process it because you can't keep punishing them for disappointing you. That's my feeling. So you either have to sit with it and accept that this is your reality and this is the relationship you're in, or like you said, you might have to go through a transformation in your relationship, whether that's together or parting ways or opening the relationship up. There are options for you if you find that what you're in right now isn't working.
Absolutely. It's a hard truth, but it's a very necessary one. And they joke about you only having one life, but it's very true. You cannot wait around punishing yourself or depriving yourself of something that you know that you truly desire to have.
I know. That's great advice. That is like the core of it for me. It's like you can't go your whole life not having lived this because you'll only end up with regret. And I think that's the worst feeling in the world is regret.
They say so many people go to the graveyard with so many dreams and aspirations that are never really like tapped into. It's the most valuable place in the whole wide world is the graveyard because of how many people take what they truly wanted to do with their lives there without ever actually tapping into it. So don't sit in a relationship that is just not as fulfilling as it could be, especially if you are actually trying. So there's two mistakes that you can make. I want to clarify. Don't deprive yourself by not expressing yourself. But if you've genuinely expressed yourself in a safe way, because that's, again, I want to be clear. If you want to communicate with people about things that are touchy, understand that and approach it with that knowledge that this may be a hard conversation or something that isn't super easy to talk about. But once you've approached it with that, that approach, and that person is still shutting you down, it's going to have to be a hard decision to make there.
That's true. But I think that that's also the right time to employ the help of a coach.
Yes.
Like that's another option for you. Seek resources if they're both willing. Okay, Marvelous. This was phenomenal. Thank you so much for coming on today. And again, for anyone who's interested in any of the things he's talked about today, pro-doming, pleasure coaching, the Foreplay 101 book, and educational content, sirmarvelous.com. Thank you, Sir Marvelous.
Thank you so much for having me.
If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with anyone who might find it interesting. And if you have any questions or topics you'd like me to cover in future episodes, feel free to reach out. Email info@thekinkconsultant.com. Until next time, keep on kinking on.